Doom Eternal is upon us. Was it worth the wait? Fuck yeah, bud. Holy shit! I would compare the leap between Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal to the leap from Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2, or Uncharted 1 to Uncharted 2. Except the difference between Doom Eternal and those other two games is that the first game in their respective series was a good game that had some cool ideas, but they just needed a second chance to truly nail it and make the second game amazing. But Doom 2016 was not just a good game, it was an amazing game. In fact, in my video on Doom 2016, I said it was my favorite first-person shooter ever. So how the hell can you take a game that was already fucking fantastic and somehow improve on almost every aspect of said game? Well, that's the question id asked themselves when developing Doom Eternal, and by God did they answer the question. This video will not be spoiler free, but I will let you know when major spoilers are about to happen and give you a timestamp to skip to avoid them. I will be talking about things like the locations in the game and the weapons, and various collectibles. Things like that I won't be putting a spoiler warning for. So if you don't want anything spoiled for you, don't watch this video. Also, I will be comparing Doom Eternal and Doom 2016 a lot in this video, and instead of saying Doom Eternal and Doom 2016 all the time, I will refer to each game as Eternal and 2016 just to simplify things a little. I played Doom Eternal twice for this video, the first on Hurt Me Plenty difficulty, which is normal mode, and the second time on Ultra Violence, which is hard mode. This game looks incredible. There's a much larger selection of locales in Eternal than there was in the last game. 2016 really only had two locations, Mars and the UAC facility on it, and Hell. And there's nothing wrong with having a small number of locations in your game, but Eternal takes us anywhere from ruined cities to nightmarish hellscapes to space stations and Arctic cult bases, and it all looks phenomenal. 2016 ran on id Tech 6 while Eternal runs on id Tech 7. I'm not gonna pretend to understand all the differences between the two engines because I am not a video game developer and have never worked with any kind of game engine whatsoever. Most of the information I have learned about id Tech 7 I got from watching Digital Foundry's video on analyzing the technology behind Eternal. Digital Foundry is a fantastic channel if you like learning about the technology behind games, and I'll link their Doom Eternal video in the description if you're interested in checking it out. But here's the gist of it. id Tech 6 still used the technology called Mega Textures, which was created for id Tech 5 and used in the first Rage game. Mega Textures basically allowed id to create one giant texture for the entire game world, and the game would access each part of said mega texture depending on what the player was seeing on screen. But there were drawbacks to this technology. The disk space required was massive, there was lots of load-in all the time, and textures were blurry up close due to several layers of compression. id switched to a technology called Vulkan for id Tech 7, jettisoning mega textures in the process. Working with Vulkan was much quicker and allowed id to put more details in the game and create more unique assets than ever before. Vulkan also takes up way less space than mega textures, which is why Eternal takes up less than half the space on your hard drive than 2016 does. Vulkan also allows for much higher resolution textures. The game wizards at id also somehow got Eternal to run at an almost rock solid 60 frames per second, which is just insane. Like seriously, holy fuck. The amount of shit that's happening at any given time, all the enemies on screen at once, the speed at which you're moving around the game world, and I barely noticed any frame rate dips in the entire game. Hats off to id, man. They have proven once again that they are a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the technology behind their games. I mean, their games are also really damn good, so that helps. The only thing about the presentation that I'm not 100% sold on is the UI. When I first booted up the game, I gotta admit I hated the look of the UI. One of the first things I did was change the color from that puke yellow to red. I didn't like the font and I didn't like the layout. It did grow on me over the course of the game, but I still think 2016's UI was way better. I know that some people are gonna say that it's not a big deal, but I disagree. The user interface is similar to sound design in games, meaning if it's good, no one will notice this even there, but if it's bad, people are going to notice. I mean, it doesn't ruin the game, but it could have been better. The character models are highly detailed, and this time around, demons will lose chunks of flesh depending on where you shoot them. It's a cool detail that really helps hammer home just how much damage you're inflicting on the mortally challenged. Animations are top-notch, and watching each type of demon scurry around the battlefield is quite entertaining. The highlights of the animations, however, are of course the glory kills. And with the new retractable blade the Doomslayer has, you can expect some really gnarly finishers that would make even Mortal Kombat fans cringe. I don't know how it's possible, but Mick Gordon actually managed to top his soundtrack in 2016, which I already considered to be one of the best scores in any video game ever, with Eternal's soundtrack. I am a huge metalhead, and this game's score is better than most metal albums I've heard. Just fucking listen to this. You gotta be kidding me! Mick even recruited a heavy metal choir for some of the score, getting the vocalists for various metal bands to do some chants and shouts. It's just sick, man. I don't know what else to say. I'm gonna be listening to the soundtrack for a long fucking time, and this is gonna go down in the history books. If this doesn't win Soundtrack of the Year, I'm gonna fucking riot. The story in 2016 was not the main focus by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, the Doomslayer himself didn't seem to give a shit about almost anything that was happening in the game. He just wanted to kill demons. But the game did actually have a pretty interesting story if you took the time to read through the codex entries and learn about what was going on at the UAC Mars base before the start of the game. Eternal's approach to the story is kind of the same, in the sense that the majority of the story is still told through lore entries that you discover as you explore the levels in game. But this time around, the developers did seem to put more of an emphasis on the narrative being told. The game takes place 8 months after the ending of 2016, and during that time, demons have invaded the Earth and killed 60% of the population. The Doomslayer has somehow gotten himself a floating spaceship called the Fortress of Doom, which is being run by Vega, the AI from the UAC facility on Mars. After the end of the last game, Samuel Hayden made his way back to Earth and became the leader of the human resistance and led them into battle against the demons for a time. The objective of the game is obviously to stop the demon invasion and reclaim Earth. To do this, the Slayer needs to find and kill 3 Hell Priests who are overseeing the invasion of Earth, and then kill the Khan Maker, the leader of the invasion. The story really feels like an incredibly over-the-top and unapologetic celebration of all things metal and geeky. There's hell and demons, angels and heaven, tons of blood, guts and gore, and a badass hero who just wants to kill the bad guys. It's like the best 90s B-movie that was never made in video game form. The game knows exactly what it is, and it goes for it full tilt, and I love it. With that being said, however, I do think that there's a little bit of a conflict of focus here that I'm not sure how to feel about. The game still absolutely wants the primary engagement for the player to be the gameplay, there's no doubt about that. But it's also very apparent that the writers at id put a lot of time and effort into fleshing out the lore and history of the world. The problem though is that if you don't read those codex entries, you will be pretty confused as to what exactly is happening during the game. I don't mind a little bit of reading in a game or audio logs if they're there to add more insight into an already fleshed out game world or narrative, but Doom Eternal chooses to tell 80 to 90% of the story through the codex, and some cutscenes in the game won't really mean anything to the player if you don't spend time reading the entries that explain the backstory and significance of the events that are happening. They've even done some cutscenes that break away from the first-person perspective to try and add more weight to the story, whereas in the first game we never left the Slayer's point of view. Personally though, I find that these cutscenes don't actually benefit from being in third person, as the camera work and editing don't really do much to up the production value in any meaningful way. I really can't think of a single cutscene that I wouldn't have preferred being in first person. Spoiler alert. The game even shows how the Doomslayer came to be one of the Night Sentinels and confirms that yes, he is in fact the same Doom guy from the original Doom games, and he speaks a few lines for the first time ever. Id wouldn't do something like that if they didn't want the players to care about the story. I'm sure that there are lots of players out there who don't read any of the lore entries or only read a few before saying screw it and just go back to killing demons for the rest of the game. And that's cool that the game lets them do that. But for someone like me who does enjoy the story that's being told, I don't want to spend so much time reading in a game just to understand the story. It really doesn't mesh well with Doom, either reading a bunch of lore entries at a time at the end of a level, or reading a lore entry every time I come across one. It really hurts the flow of the game. So personally, I would prefer it if id made a decision as to whether or not they are going to actually focus on the story and implement more in-game cinematics or dialogue to tell the story better, or just focus on the gameplay. Because this weird middle ground that they've decided on doesn't really work super well, and every cutscene in the game is already skippable with no load times to delay getting back to the action. So if the player doesn't care at all, they can just skip it and get back to shooting in less than a second. In the video I did on 2016, I described its gameplay as having more in common with a game like Superhot than Call of Duty, which is a first-person shooter puzzle game, as it designed the game's combat with the idea of combat chess in mind, meaning you had certain tools to use against the various enemies you fought throughout the game, and figuring out how to utilize each piece in your arsenal to best combat the demonic horde was an integral part of the game. Well, Eternal took that concept and ran with it all the way to the fucking moon and back, because goddamn, this game does not fuck around. At a glance, Eternal seems even more like a mindless arcade shooter than 2016 did. There's lots of bright colored icons everywhere, tons of brutal violence, and you're fighting literal demons from hell. But this aesthetic, which I love, is hiding what I would call the thinking man's shooter. In fact, Superhot isn't the only game I would compare Eternal to over Call of Duty or Battlefield. I think that Eternal is like Superhot crossed with a survival horror game on steroids. Not only are there a few maps in the game that sort of feel like a singular location, similar to say the Spencer Mansion from the first Resident Evil, where you have to find various keys to unlock certain doors that allow you to access new locations in the level you couldn't before, there's also a serious game of resource management being played here. There are 3 resources you need to be aware of at all times during Eternal: health, armor, and ammo, and the game gives you tools to gather said resources during gameplay. Like in 2016, you use glory kills to farm health from enemies, and any enemy killed with the chainsaw will drop ammo. The third part to this is the Flame Belch, which is a shoulder-mounted flamethrower that sets enemies alight, and any enemy that's on fire will drop armor. This resource triangle that you need to manage will be at the forefront of your moment-to-moment gameplay decision-making, and learning to effectively manage all 3 is the key to your success in Eternal. Much like how you would do the exact same thing in regards to health and ammo in a survival horror game like Resident Evil, except here it's at Mach speed. This is without a doubt the biggest change from 2016, and it's rubbed some people the wrong way, which I completely understand. 2016 wasn't a mindless shooter by any means, but compared to Eternal, the amount of decisions you had to make at any given time were a lot less. You rarely found yourself wanting for ammo, and there were steady health and armor pickups littered around the battlefield, along with the ability to get health and ammo from killing enemies. 2016 was a lot more forgiving in that sense. Ammo in Eternal is nowhere near as plentiful as it was in 2016. Ammo, health, and armor pickups are more scarce, and the ammo caps of each gun are much lower than before. What this results in is the player using the chainsaw and changing weapons a lot more frequently than in 2016, where you could basically use the super shotgun and one other gun like the chain gun or Gauss cannon for the entire game. The chainsaw has been tweaked a little to account for this shift, and now you don't need to equip the chainsaw before tearing into an enemy, you just press the button. You also need to use the Flame Belch and glory kills often to refill your health and armor. This constant need to keep an eye on your resources is a big change from how 2016 played, and it's understandable that some people didn't like it. It definitely takes a bit of time to unlearn the way you played 2016 and learn how to play Eternal the way it's intended to be played, but once you do, you'll find a hell of a rewarding experience. To compensate for this need to chainsaw enemies frequently, the game has the chainsaw fuel on a quick recharge, so you won't have to wait long to use it again if you run out of fuel. The chainsaw is still an insta-kill in Eternal, although it's a lot less effective in that regard. The game has divided demons into different categories: fodder, heavy demons, and super heavy demons. Fodder enemies such as the Imp are your main source for farming resources and only require 1 fuel charge to kill. Heavy demons such as the Revenant require 3 charges to kill, which is the maximum amount of charges you can have at any given time. And super heavy demons and bosses are immune to the chainsaw altogether. I don't mind the chainsaw being useless against super heavy demons, but using it to tear into all kinds of demons and seeing each animation for each demon was a cool part of 2016. And in Eternal, I found that I only had enough fuel to kill heavy demons every so often, as fuel pickups are a lot rarer. I wish there were a little bit more opportunities to chainsaw heavy demons. Let's go over the arsenal of demon-destroying, death-dealing weapons you have at your disposal in Eternal. You have some returning guns, which are more or less the same as they were before, even if some of their names have changed. There's the combat shotgun, the super shotgun, the heavy cannon, which is basically the heavy assault rifle, the chain gun, the plasma rifle, the rocket launcher, and the BFG 9000. The new weapons are the ballista, which is similar to the Gauss cannon, but different enough to where I wouldn't consider it to be the Gauss cannon, the crucible, and the unmaker, which is actually a weapon from Doom 64 and a weapon you need to unlock. You don't get it through game progress. You also have grenades at your disposal and a new ice bomb, which freezes enemies in place for a set amount of time. The freeze bomb is fucking awesome and incredibly useful, but it takes up the same slot as the grenade, so once I unlocked it, I never really used the grenade again. There's also a new blood punch, which is basically a really powerful melee that shoots out a wave of energy and does heavy damage to any enemy in the vicinity. Unlike 2016, I found myself using every weapon throughout the entire game in Eternal. I do have my favorites, of course, but every gun is useful in its own way. Part of the reason for that is because of the way id redesigned a couple elements of combat. In Eternal, a few enemies have weak points that you can exploit using a specific weapon or weapon mod. You can destroy a few demon weapons like the Revenant's shoulder cannons, which will nerf the damage they can do. One of the best ways to do this is to use the scope mod for the heavy cannon or the sticky bomb mod for the combat shotgun. You can also shoot a sticky bomb into a Cacodemon's mouth to stagger it and use the plasma rifle to make quick work of enemy shields. This design keeps certain guns in your rotation even when you get the more powerful weapons in the game. Just like 2016, there are a lot of different upgrades you can get for every part of the Slayer. There are weapon mods which you can upgrade, and once a mod is upgraded to the max, you can perform mastery challenges to unlock an extra effect for each gun. The super shotgun, for example, has the meat hook mod, which allows you to grab onto an enemy and pull yourself towards them, and once you complete the mastery challenge, the meat hook sets fire to any enemy you grab onto, meaning they'll drop armor once killed. The super shotgun is fucking sick, guys, like, holy fuck, dude. There are runes like in 2016, but there are no longer rune challenges, and you can select which rune you want to unlock instead of having to find it during a level. Upgrading the Slayer this time not only gives you higher ammo, health, or armor caps, but there are special upgrades that are unlocked if you pick 2 upgrades on the same node. You can upgrade the suit as well from 5 different small branches. These upgrades can dramatically affect the way you play the game, and finding out which combination works best for you is an integral and enjoyable part of the experience. And you get to decide which upgrades you want from the jump. There aren't any upgrades that are blocked off from you until you buy the previous upgrade or whatever, giving you even more freedom in how you approach speccing out your Doomslayer. Replacing the rune challenges are these optional Gore Nest challenges that you can find in levels. These are timed challenges that spawn in demons at the area of the Gore Nest, and you need to kill all demons in the required time. These happen seamlessly in game, and any resources that you use to fight in these challenges don't come back if you fail to beat them. Personally, I think that's a little dumb, as if I found myself stuck on a particularly hard one, I would just reload the checkpoint to regain all the resources I had lost during the fight. So you can still get your resources back, it's just annoying to do so. Another optional challenge you can complete are Slayer Gates. There are 6 Slayer Gates in the game, and to unlock them you need to find a key somewhere in the level. These are all relatively close to the gates and easy to obtain, so it doesn't hinder the pacing too much. Whenever you beat a Slayer Gate, you get a key, and if you get all 6 keys, you can then unlock the Unmaker. These are formidable challenges, and if you're stuck on one, you can replay them by going back into the level once you've gained more upgrades from later on in the game. And finally, we have Master Levels, which are levels that have been remixed with tougher enemies to offer a higher challenge. At current time, there are only 2 Master Levels, but it has said that there will be more coming. There are some issues I have with the game. Most of these are minor issues, but they are worth mentioning. First off, the game has a bigger emphasis on platforming this time around, and for the most part I enjoyed it a lot. It's a nice break from the constant shooting, and I found it to be fast and fluid. But there are a handful of sections in the game that were a little bit annoying, leaning towards frustrating. In these sections, it isn't always clear where you need to go, and even when you do figure it out, it can be more difficult than it should be to actually pull off what the game is asking you to do. It was never really bad, but not every sequence was fun. There are a few times in the game where you have to get through this purple sludge shit on the ground that restricts your movement, stopping you from jumping and dashing. These sections aren't fun and bring the pace of the game to a screeching halt. They are also almost always accompanied by these fucking tentacle things that pop up from the ground, which you have to shoot before they hit you like an M-rated game of whack-a-mole. These tendrils also appear outside of these sections, and they are just as annoying in those. And the swimming sections are just awful, just terrible. I wish the default movement speed of the Doomslayer was a little faster, as towards the end of the game it almost starts to feel like you're moving too slow, as you've hopefully mastered the movement in the game by then. I also would have liked to have seen more Maker enemies. There are only 2 in the whole game, the Con Maker and these fucking things. I also think that the ammo caps are just a touch too low even when they're fully upgraded. But you know what I don't have a problem with? The Marauders. The Marauders are probably the most talked about part of the game aside from the shift to the resource management gameplay. A lot of people have issues with this guy. Personally, I don't. The Marauder has a shotgun he shoots you with if you get too close. He has an axe that he can send energy waves out of to hit you if you get too far. He has a shield that he instantly pops up whenever you try and shoot him, and he can spawn an energy dog that chases you down and obstructs your movement and vision if it hits you, and it doesn't go away until you shoot it to kill it. Now, I will admit that the first time you fight the Marauder, it's kind of frustrating because you're trying to figure out how his moves work, and where the best distance between the two of you is and all that kind of stuff. But after the second or third time I fought him, I got it. I fought the Marauder the way I was supposed to, and it was fine. Here's how you fight the Marauder. First, stay away from him. If you stay far enough away from him, he won't use his shotgun on you, and the distance you need to be from him isn't really that far. Whenever his eyes glow green, shoot him with either the super shotgun or the ballista, and make sure you have the other gun as your quick change gun so you can shoot him twice in quick succession. He will shoot his axe waves at you, but those are easy enough to dodge just by using the dash button. I've seen people say that his dog only spawns if his shield is hit either by your shot or an NPC's, and it definitely does seem like it will spawn that way. But I've also seen his dog spawn when I'm pretty damn sure that nothing hit his shield, so I'm not completely sure about that. But the dog only takes one shot to kill, so it's not that bad. I don't want to be that guy, but I honestly think that people who have an issue with the Marauder are just not fighting him properly. I mean, even on ultra violence difficulty, I took him down with relative ease. And this is not me trying to say, oh, look how good of a gamer I am, because number one, who gives a fuck? And number two, I'm really not that good. I've watched a good amount of videos of people fighting the Marauder, and a lot of the time if someone's having trouble with him, it's because they aren't fighting him properly, either because they haven't taken the time to figure him out or they just don't want to. I will say this though, I think that having to fight the Marauder when there's a bunch of other enemies around is a little bit too much, as the Marauder demands so much of your attention. Thankfully, this only happens a couple times. Eternal has an asymmetrical multiplayer mode called Battle Mode, in which 2 players take control of one of 5 demons from the campaign and fight against a solo player playing as the Doomslayer. It's a unique mode, and there's more work put into it than I thought there'd be. But ultimately, I don't think this will be something that stands the test of time. It is fun for a couple hours, but it never seemed to be that well balanced, as every game I played either the demons or Doomslayer would win every round. There was never a match where it would go back and forth. Still, I'm sure that there will be some people who really love it. I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge just how much of a complete package this game really is. You get the amazing single-player campaign, which will take you around 15 hours to complete, with multiple difficulty levels to choose from. You get the multiplayer mode, which isn't the reason you should get Doom Eternal, but it is a fun distraction once you complete the campaign. You get lots of customization options for your weapons, the Doomslayer, and the demons in-game. You get tons of collectibles to find, including toys of each demon that unlocks their in-game models for viewing, vinyl records that let you play a song from other id games, and cheat codes that let you change various things about the game, like having infinite lives and ammo. A lot of these things would be added as microtransactions in other games, even other games published by Bethesda, which is the publisher of Doom Eternal. But id has all this shit in the game without any extra fees. There are no microtransactions in the game whatsoever. There is a season pass that you can buy, which will have 2 single-player campaign DLCs, but at the moment there isn't a lot of information about it. When a game is this good though, I have no problem buying some DLC if it holds up to the quality of the main game. Eternal even comes with 2 other entire games, Doom 1 and Doom 2, that you can unlock and play in the Fortress of Doom. And if you pre-ordered the game like I did, you get Doom 64 as well. That's 4 full games for the price of 1. Come on guys, that's how you fucking do it, game developers and publishers. Thank you, id. Thank you. The biggest question I've been asking myself since completing Doom Eternal is whether or not I like it more than 2016, and to be honest, I'm not sure. Eternal is in many ways a better game than 2016, but I do think that overall 2016 was a tighter, more focused, and better paced experience. It kind of reminds me of how I feel about the Batman Arkham franchise. I love every game in the series, and even though later games would add a whole open world to explore and the Batmobile and expand on the combat and story and gadgets, the first game, Arkham Asylum, is still my favorite, because it is such a focused, self-contained, and tight experience. So I don't know at the moment which game I prefer, but I can tell you that both games are fucking outstanding and are fully worth your time and money. I'm gonna give Doom Eternal a 9.5 out of 10. The first Game of the Year contender is out, and I am very excited to get to reviewing more games. I don't actually know though when I'll get around to doing more new releases because of this whole lockdown thing going on right now. See, I don't buy any games digitally unless there isn't a physical version of the game to buy, because I enjoy physical media and I'm a bit of a collector. So even though I can buy Resident Evil 3 Remake now, I probably won't. I'd rather wait it out until I can buy a physical version of the game. And since The Last of Us Part 2 got indefinitely delayed, I really don't know which games the next few videos will be about. I'll figure it out though. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and commenting your thoughts on Doom Eternal. Thanks for watching.